A few years ago, I was offered an SDA position with Amazon, one of my dream companies at the time. Amazon, yes, that Amazon, one of the 5 biggest tech companies in America, has businesses in logistics, e-commerce, AI, and much more. And yes, also the same company that made the buildings that looked like balls. But jokes aside, I finally said no to the offer and decided to stay at the startup that I was at. Fast forward to a few years later, Amazon is one of the most valuable companies in the world. And the startup I was at, well, they finally made an exit and was acquired. But I made absolutely $0 from the acquisition. Do I regret that? Today, I wanted to share my experience. What was it like interviewing at Amazon? What was the actual offer from Amazon? And why did I decide to stay at the startup? And do I actually regret that decision? Alright, let's get into it. If this is your first time on the channel, my name is Zhia, and on this channel I make videos about actionable tips to grow as a software engineer. Learn to code and code to learn. So before we start talking about how I landed the offer from Amazon, maybe let's rewind and talk about my background and how I landed myself in that position to interview at Amazon. I did not graduate from an Ivy League school or any top tier school in the United States. In fact, I went to a community college in Idaho for 2 years, and then I transferred to a small Catholic university to finish up my bachelor's in computer science. I started learning computer science in my 3rd year of college because it sounded kind of fun to me at the time. The only thing resembling a computer that I had growing up was a Chinese copycat of Nintendo. And even then, every time I put a tape in it, it would break, and I would have to knock on it a couple of times in order for it to work. When I graduated, I didn't have any jobs lined up or even any interviews. I applied to as many big tech companies as I could. Facebook, Amazon, Google, you name it. And by some good fortune, I managed to land a few phone interviews. But at the time, I didn't really know what a technical phone screen was. All I thought was they were going to ask me some questions about what a binary tree was or what a linked list was. I didn't know that LeetCode was even a thing. So, needless to say, I failed all of my interviews. I didn't even make it to a single on-site. I was feeling pretty dejected, terrible about myself because was all my 4 years of college education wasted? Did I mess up? Was my future in jeopardy because of that? Well, I didn't really give up in that case. I started applying again, and as luck would have it, finally a small startup in Kirkland decided to take a gamble on me and hired me in as an entry-level software engineer. The exact compensation structure was my base pay was $60,000 a year or $5,000 a month. I had no signing bonus or performance bonus. I was given stock options that I wasn't really sure how to value them at the time, so I kind of wrote it off as being worth 0. So in total, my salary and everything, my total compensation for that first year was $60,000. When I was at the startup, I learned everything as quickly as I could. I was working alongside folks who graduated from Ivy League schools and people who have worked at Microsoft, Amazon, Google. I soaked everything up like a sponge, learning everything, and I wasn't afraid to ask questions because I knew that was the best way that I could learn from all of these folks that were superstars, in my opinion. So I grew really quickly in that first year. And my second year, I started to feel this little itch in my heart. I wanted to prove myself again. So I started interviewing. I started looking around for startups, for smaller companies that were hiring, and I wanted to try my luck to see what I would get. As luck would have it, another startup that was growing really quickly in Seattle offered me a software engineer 2 position. And their compensation was much better this time. They offered me $100,000 plus stock options. No signing bonus, no performance bonus, same thing. Again, I wrote off the stock options, so I took my total first year potential compensation as $100,000. So when I compared $60,000 my first year and $100,000 my next year, it was almost a 50% increase in compensation. I was excited beyond imagination. In just 1 year, I have almost increased my compensation. Although I haven't signed the offer yet, but I was terribly excited. So I went to my manager and I asked them, I really liked working here and I felt that I've grown a lot, but I felt that my role and my compensation it wasn't really a match. I've asked around, I've interviewed at other places, and they offered me this amount. Would the company be willing to match that offer? To my surprise, they said yes. They matched my offer, they gave me $100,000, and that's how I got my raise. After my second year of success, my confidence just grew. I was swelling inside because I knew I had skills that were very transferable and companies were willing to pay for it. So my third year, I started to have a little bit of an ambition. I wanted to try interviewing at a big tech company again. And as luck would have it, an Amazon recruiter reached out to me on LinkedIn and they asked if I was interested in interviewing at Amazon. Woo, boy, I was ready this time around. I was doing my lead code questions. I was going on system design and reading as much as I could about it. I was ready this time to interview. And deep down within, I had this fire burning within me. I really wanted to get this offer from Amazon because in college, I was rejected by all of these big tech companies. I felt like I was valueless. No one wanted me. So now I wanted to redeem myself and prove my worth. It was a pretty standard interviewing round at Amazon. I went through a phone screen, and then after I passed that, I was brought on-site at Seattle HQ. During the on-site, I was given 4 rounds. I had 2 rounds of coding, 1 round of leadership or behavioral, and I had another 4th round with the hiring manager chat. So throughout those 4 sessions, it was pretty standard as you would expect from any top tier tech companies. The coding questions, I don't really remember what they were, but it wasn't terribly hard. But the interviewers were extremely nice. They grilled me hard, but I also thought it was really fair and I enjoyed going through those sessions with them. The behavioral round was a little bit interesting to me because I'd never gone through Amazon's behavioral round. And I remember really distinctly at the time, and they were asking a lot of leadership-based questions, such as when was the last time you had a conflict and how do you resolve those conflicts? They wanted to see if you embody some of the principles and values that Amazon really values in the company. And finally, the hiring manager chat, that was pretty standard. And I think at that point, I have technical rounds and everything was solid. So chatting with the hiring manager was an opportunity to learn about the team, to learn about the manager, and just to get a vibe for whether we would work well together. All in all, the 4 rounds on site plus the phone screen, that was all the interviews I had at Amazon. And finally, the recruiter called me and said, "Congratulations, we've truly enjoyed working with you and we would love to offer you a position." Needless to say, given this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, I decided to quit the startup and join Amazon. So the next day, I packed up all my bags and I took the letter and I went to my manager and I told them, "Thank you for teaching me all these years. I've decided to leave and join Amazon." Well, as you could tell from the start of this story, I didn't actually leave the startup. I decided to stay in the end. Why? Well, my manager asked me how much Amazon was offering, and they decided to match that offer. And on top of it, they decided to apply for a green card on my behalf. Now, that green card probably cost me a lot of money and a lot of opportunities. So let's calculate exactly how much this green card cost me. So let's look at what was the offer from Amazon. So I'm looking at my offer from Amazon right now, and here's what it was. Equity, salary, and sign-on. So that is pretty much a pretty standard compensation structure. The title that was given was SDE 2 or Software Engineering 2. My salary was $117,000 per year. My equity was 88 shares of Amazon vested over 4 years. 5% my first year, 15% second, 40 and 40 the next 2 years. My signing bonus at the time was $21,000 my first year and $16,000 the second year. So for grand total of $37,000 signing bonus. So here's what my total compensation would have looked like my first year. $140,000 and my second year would have been $138,000. This represented a 40% increase from what I was making in my second year at the startup, which was $100,000. So essentially, just by interviewing my third year, I've increased it 40%. First year, 60%, the second year, 40%. Now, just for comparison's sake, let's look at how much Amazon's stocks were worth at the time. and how much they would have been worth today in 2022. Let's take a look at how much the stocks would have been worth today. Amazon stocks have done extremely well over the past few years. In 2015, we can see that Amazon stock was around $500, and today they're worth about $3,000. My offer was 88 stocks at $500 in 2015, and at $3,000 today, it would have been worth $264,000. Boy, that's a lot of money. Wow, this is crazy. I did not imagine this. That wasn't a green card. It was a gold card. How much money it costs for staying at the startup. And well, of course, I might not have kept all the stocks. We might have argued, well, there's no way you could have said anything. Maybe the startup you were at, if they didn't sold out and they went public, you might have made a lot more money. Yes, that's a very valid argument. But I think more realistically, I probably would have sold them and bought a house in Bellevue where I live. Now, so just to summarize everything and make a conclusion here, do I regret staying at the startup? Well, to be honest, yes and no. Looking at how much money they were offering me and how much I potentially would have made, that was definitely a big stab right here. It definitely hurt because I could have had a house, or I could have, used that money for a lot of purposes. Financial freedom right there. But I can't complain. You can't just rewind the time and change your decisions. So I definitely did learn a lot of things at the startup. I've acquired a lot of skills, and I finally got the green card that I was looking for. So now my status is stable. I can go any company that I want. I have a lot of flexibility, and that flexibility, that optionality of staying in the US, if I wanted to, that's worth a lot of money. And I don't think you could put a dollar amount on that state of mind. So there you go. That was my final decision. So that, my friends, is how I decided to stay at the startup instead of Amazon. Just to summarize everything. 1, the startup decided to offer me and match the compensation that I was given at Amazon. And number 2, the startup decided to apply for a green card for me. So that was like the biggest main attraction for me in staying with the startup. And in addition, I already worked really closely with all of the other folks at the startup. I knew who they were. I knew sort of my growth path going forward, and I was feeling pretty comfortable. And that, I think, was one of the main problems there. I was feeling comfortable. I didn't want to change. I was attracted and I was pulled into being in this comfort zone. Okay, that was my experience of interviewing at Amazon, of my background and how I decided to stay at the startup. What did I learn in those 4 years at the startup? Well, that will be my upcoming video. So subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you in the next video.